I'm pretty loud too. I get like can't stop talking.
I know. I get like super excited, and then I have to go just hold. I hold on to the edges here sometimes. I'm like, shh.
It's catching everything.
Yeah. I'm so glad you're here. Okay, I wrote down.
Oh, I have a bunch of written down things.
Oh, good. I didn't hear what you said.
Get comfortable.
Oh, it was for her. Ignore it.
Just ignore it. We're
Yeah.
just here. Two friends hanging out.
Yeah. Okay. Welcome to In the Act, a radio program on process in the creative life. Creativity does not just start and stop with artists. We all make aesthetic or guiding decisions. Our aim is to talk through the process and investigate how we choose to express ourselves and to live creatively. We are connecting with people about their lives. That's the subject of our show. Broadcasting from Mead Public Library in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, I am Erica Hunsinger, and this is In the Act. And today's guest on In the Act is Sarah Baughman, who is fantastic and fabulous and artist, friend, baker, curious, outside dog walker, nature lover.
Absolutely accurate. In a nutshell, that's exactly me.
Yay. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I know, me too.
Wrote all this stuff down to say, but I can't even read right now because I'm just like
I know.
so elevated. So
well, there'll be like our little we'll have notes on the side.
Yeah, little anchors.
In case we can't find something to say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that'll happen.
Right. I mean, it's a funny thing because I think the interviews are very much like a creative process that I'm comfortable with.
Oh, yeah.
You know, is like that intuitive, like, I'll see how it goes. What are we going to say? And maybe some structure on the side.
Yeah, totally. It's like a path that you're just slowly going to kind of, like, it's all covered. And as you walk through it, you're like, oh, wait, there's another way to go.
Yeah.
There's another feeling of inspiration. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. I was, I guess my inkling of wanting to have you on was because I'm a huge fan of your baked goods
Oh, yeah.
artist. What did you say?
My signature
Yeah.
bakery. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think of you as an artist within creation of baked goods because you learn to know ingredients from the ground up, growing things and observing things, and then creating your own things from that. And baked goods are just another level too, because it's not like cooking. It is like a physics of some sort and escapes many of us as well. So
Yeah. I definitely feel like even in that way of inspiration that we were just talking about, baking for me, it was never like a direct path that I was on. It just kind of opened up opportunities for me, especially with Paradigm. Like it just like started becoming friends with people who were there. And then I think I went to a party at Kate's house, and that's what like kind of threw me into this, like, oh, baking would be fun. But
do you remember what you baked?
Yeah, lemon bars, gluten-free lemon bars.
Gluten-free.
And she was like, can you be my baker? Like, can you be the baker now? And I was like, I'm 17. I don't know what I'm doing. You know, I just happened to figure out a recipe. But it was from the ground up. It was completely an adventure for me because I had done, baking at home, like box baking and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it was like you bake one thing in a day, and that's like the pinnacle of your experience. You're like, I'm baking brownies and nothing else matters today because I have to complete this task that's difficult. But like now I've been doing it for 10 years, and people will be like, oh, what did you bake today? And I'm like, you don't want me to list off the list. It's going to take me a while. Like, because every day is a complex day of prep,
Totally.
But between starting there as the baker, I also initially started as one of the sign makers. I was making a lot of our chalkboards, and I was doing a lot of our signage.
Yeah.
And so I had these two avenues of total creative expression and control. Like I could do, the place is so open-ended to what you can present as creative art.
Right.
And so it was like I have this baking outlet for my creativity, and then I have chalkboard signs and signage, and we have a very interesting sense of humor there, and so it can kind of fall into those different realms.
Yeah.
So it was really fun to grow and always be expressing myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And those, the signage includes like little drawings too, like these really beautiful little line drawings.
Yeah. Because it has to be, and one thing I want to talk about is like the functionality of art.
Yeah.
And how, so with like signage in particular, there was a purpose, there was a work to be done with it, where it's like this art has a meaning and a purpose. It's not just, I think there's just like a spectrum of what art does. And for this, it's not just like an emotional expression. This has to like complete a task. So like menu design, you want it to be able to be read. You want the person to look at it and know exactly what they're supposed to do with that input. And so I had to just learn how to use like, I don't know, hand lettering and stuff to my ability.
Totally.
But I also was doing this creative baking thing where it was all about feeling. It was all about like, I'm going to make something for somebody and I hope that it brightens their day. Like the point was to create something that met somebody's dietary restrictions, first of all, was made with quality ingredients, but then also it was just like a pure moment of joy for somebody else that they could just like obtain.
Wow.
So yeah, it's a very, like, it's been my job for so long, but it's so deep. It's so complex.
Yeah.
And so.
I love that definition of it. Yeah. It's such a, the input and then the receiver as the joyful receiver, you know, and it's also nourishing as well. So you're like nourishing their body as well.
Yeah,
it's such an interesting,
there's so much
circle.
Nourishment. Yeah, totally.
I love that.
Yeah. So that's just like what I was thinking of kind of as I was reflecting on what my daily tasks are, what I do, like, especially as a creative person, but also just like the nitty gritty of like, okay, well, what do I do in a day? I'm making this bakery for people. That's like the whole point of it. But I'm also able to introduce emotions into it and like expression into it. So
yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, it's so fun to go in and see the glass case to see what today is or the season of.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Seasonal stuff is so much fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. That aspect of it is really wonderful. It's a bummer when the season ends though, and we've had such a nice consistent run with rhubarb or strawberries.
I was just going to say rhubarb.
And then all of a sudden it's just like, nope, we're out.
Yeah.
But that's kind of, it keeps it charming. You know, it keeps it interesting.
Totally.
I mean, it's good to have that rotation. I think I'm a person of, I don't find comfort in routine, which I think is kind of a strange thing. You don't feel that either?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I have to have it because it keeps me grounded.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think maybe, so I do a lot of dog sitting and house sitting.
Yeah.
And I think it makes me a good, like, I function well in new environments and in lack of routine, I guess.
Yeah.
There's something about it. I get to just kind of find motivation through how I feel right now versus this like expectation of external like structure.
Totally.
And so like the seasonal thing helps me stay routine in some way. And it gives me this disruption that I can expect over the year, but also it keeps me on my toes and I like living in that state. I like being able to just, you know, jump into whatever we're feeling that day. Or, you know, I saw an Instagram post and it had an ingredient that I want to incorporate or something.
Right.
So
I love that flexibility.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's really fun.
And I love that, you know, you're relating the cycle, the growth cycle, blah, blah, blah. That was really hard to say. Growth cycle. The growing cycle, maybe.
Oh, yeah.
Of seasons, you know, as a loose, hard structure to kind of flow within. And I always talk about feeling like I have to have like a set playground parameter for myself, then you can be free within that.
Yeah.
And it sort of feels in that same vein that you can like explore and find that newness and excitement and still keep that level of engagement and verve
Yeah, totally.
For what you're doing.
Because you have to balance it out. There has to be some balance.
Yeah.
But if you can incorporate it into the motivational aspect, like the fun movement of the play into the work, I don't know. I think that's a really great balance to have. So
absolutely. Yeah. And I love, when you were saying it's not like I sought out to be a baker, and talking with people about their creative process in the show has been really interesting, because there's so many people who are like, I just really like doing this thing.
Oh, yeah.
And so I just kind of fell into it.
Yep.
Or I was going over here and connecting with these people, and it felt like I was of that people. And so then it fortified. And, there's something about the creative or our life experiences, or how we're drawn to things based on, I think if we follow what we love, and if we follow like where we're comfortable going towards, it'll supplant and provide fruits for your being and for what you want to do.
Yeah, totally. I think when you like being around people who also share those values, it like there's something about those connections when you find that that I draw a lot of inspiration from, like after I leave those situations, like when I leave, like truly after we are done with this conversation, I have this like elated feeling where I'm like, I just feel elevated. And I think that it's this feeling of kind of pulling apart those things that are happening in our minds that like creativity is made up of.
Yeah.
And then saying like, oh, I share that too. Oh, I feel that as well. And relating, like suddenly we're relating to each other as people and as humans. And it suddenly gets very metaphysical, but there's something about it that when I leave those situations, I'm like, I feel very whole. And I think that's a really wonderful experience to share with people. And like with the pandemic, I felt a big gap in that emotion that I hadn't really been able to identify.
Yeah.
But when you find those groups of people who share, maybe a drive or a pull towards a specific thing, they kind of elevate you along, when you have conversations or when you share experiences. So, and I've been having a lot more of those lately as I communicate with people and I share space with people. I'm redeveloping and kind of re-engaging with those emotions. Yeah. That elevation. So it's really fun.
It is it's such a good point too, of like, we have missed it. So everybody's missed it. And we've had to put so many things on the back burner and suppress things and deny things and put boundaries on. And we've had to sort of re-navigate and relearn or learn how to engage in new ways or in ways we want to be more thoughtful about.
Yeah.
And that's really changed, I think, everybody's approach to relationships in general.
Yeah, I'm definitely noticing, especially when I'm at work, like this is just, it's very present in my mind because I spend so many hours, a week doing this task in this space. And there's so many like moments when someone will come in and I'll see them and I've had that with you where like, I want to talk to that person. And I have the ability to take a second to chat with somebody. And it's so funny because I'm like checking in with a human and all of a sudden I have all these things I want to say and this emotional wave comes up because I'm having this connection and I have to almost filter through what I actually should, focus on right now because I want to share something. But I get overwhelmed because all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I get to talk to somebody in real time, in real life, face to face.
Yeah.
And we have to, those moments are really sacred now. They kind of shifted differently. And I look forward to sharing those moments with people. It's not like I never valued them before, but I just have a different appreciation for it now where I'm so excited and I almost get overwhelmed with emotion.
Yeah.
And I have to, again, like touch base and say like, okay, like what am I actually going to talk about right now? But I mean, I've had those moments with so many people at Paradigm specifically. And then, if I run into somebody on a dog walk or something like, I just want to share those emotions with people.
Yeah. And I love you talking about like the secondary part of it is like when that piece is over with and you're I think, what did you say? You said you felt a sense of wholeness.
Yeah.
I totally got that when you said that. I was like, oh, that is something that I relate to, that feeling. And it is a really precious difference that or maybe it's just that I tune into it more now as well. Because I might only see you in a day, like I think we've had to isolate so much that it's really shifted how we think about those things and experience them. Yeah. Great points. Ooh, yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
It's just easy to talk about this stuff. It's just really important.
It is really important.
Yeah. And it's always like hanging out right under the surface for me. I can tell. I think I've developed a lot more. My emotions feel like saturated. Like I feel saturated by my emotions, I guess.
Yeah.
Where I'm very much, I'm more in tune with them now than I ever have been. And not in a way where I feel like I have control over it. It's very much just in this like, I can feel the weight of it,
Sure.
And I think like one big thing that I was really excited to talk to you about was I'm really into dreams and the emotions that come right after you wake up from a dream.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of I'm absolutely intrigued by that. And I think and it can be very negative, it can be very positive, but it's fascinating to me.
Totally.
Because it's just something so interesting.
Yeah.
But the main thing is like when you wake up from a dream, you have real emotions. Like you are experiencing real feelings from something that wasn't real.
Yeah.
And I don't know, there's something about that is translating into my art a lot.
Oh, interesting.
And into my creative process. So
yeah. Oh, gal, we could just like talk about, okay. So with the dream states, I think there's so many people that like deny that dreams mean anything. And then there's the other side that like there's a set things that
the symbols
like
of stuff.
This means this in your dream.
If you have a dream where your teeth fall out, it's like
it means this, X, Y, and Z.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I don't believe either one of those.
No,
things.
me neither. Right? Me neither. There's something like I don't think there's a map to follow when you have a dream.
Right.
I think the fascination to me comes in like the you're in this state that you can't control. It's just, your mind is off sort of. And you're having all these experiences that aren't real, quote, but you come out of it and you're in a different state because you've had this, like, you've watched this movie and it made you feel something.
Yeah. And your movie is like giving you your own symbols and associations that are specific to you. Yeah. So, me dreaming about a bear would be very different than you dreaming about a bear. Yeah. So, like if I'm terrified of bears and you have like had a great experience with bears, but our brains are driven to create these scenarios inside of us to then, I do think, learn from and kind of evaluate and think and reflect on. And do you try and write the dreams down?
Yeah. Well, for a while I would, my coworker, Matt, I would I would wake up first thing. I don't know why him. I think it was because I would see him in a couple hours. I would text him my dream and it would be, I have like absolutely absurd, vivid dreams that, like I said, they stick with me after I wake up. And sometimes they're very unsettling. And I think I have to process it in a more like physical way where I have to write it out and see it and process it. But I think there's some level of just fascination with it where I'm like, this is the most entertaining thing. And it just happens.
It's pretty entertaining.
Completely uncontrolled. Yeah. Almost every night. And it's just so vivid that really sticks with me. So
yeah.
Or it's just, absolutely weird, crazy, silly stuff that when you say it out loud, you're like, that doesn't make any sense. Why would my brain think that? But also, it's a culmination of like reflecting on your day, reflecting on your stressors, reflecting on anxiety and how your mood has been. Yeah. So it makes sense that it's just absolutely crazy.
Right. And the surrealistic story that is then presented to itself. It's like a Dali-esque.
Yeah. Yeah, and to read it and to try and assign a literal meaning, come on.
Right.
Just to me, it's just like, I'm fascinated by that there isn't an answer to it. And the ambiguity
Except
that it brings.
yours.
Yeah.
Like,
yes.
I think that there's elements about, I think some psychologists say that every person or aspect of the dream is some part of yourself. And of course, that's partly true.
Yeah.
But to then sort of like put yourself in those particular shoes, or that, even if you're the antagonist, like, what does that mean? Yeah. And it's fascinating.
Yeah. Isn't it? It's just weird.
I love that your process of that. Anyway, okay, carry on.
Carry on. Back to our conversation.
Yeah, I'll just hang out over here.
Welcome back to In the Act. I'm Erica Hunsinger. We're here with Sarah Baughman, and we were talking about dreams, and specifically like when a dream. I'm wondering if you have a dream about something specific that then you may or may not write down, but you have, like, for example, John mentioned Buddy Guy. Like when you hear that name again, like years later or whatever, it doesn't matter. Do you automatically associate some part back to that dream and can relive part of that?
I'll have that actually. I wish I had an exact example, but there will be moments where I have, years ago have had dreams, and they're either so realistic that I can't remember if it was real or not.
Yeah.
Or I will wake up feeling the emotion so intensely that I have to question whether or not something, like, am I having a memory right now? Is this a memory, or am I having a dream that the emotions are with me from that?
Yes.
Which is it can be a very difficult, emotional state to be in.
Agreed.
Like I remember a dream that I had about my dog, and it was very just traumatic in the dream. And I woke up and I had to rush to her and make sure like she was okay, because I couldn't deny these emotions. And it was as if I had just observed something happening, and my mind needed to have this like physical reminder, like, nope, that was a dream. That wasn't real.
Right.
So it can be very controlling and very kind of chaotic.
I agree.
So
yeah.
Let's hope it's just about Buddy Guy instead. A nice moment with him.
But they're all real. I mean, they all influence or can influence, I suppose, if you choose to look at them. Mm-hmm. So you said that, I'm glad we focused on dreams for a little bit, and you said that they influence your work. Mm-hmm. How does that translate for you? Well,
so a lot of over the last 2 years or so, I've just had an elevated state of internal, almost like buzzing static noise, where I feel as if I can't read what's happening emotionally and what I'm expressing outwardly. And it's a very strange thing to navigate. And I'm so lucky to be able to talk to a therapist about it. And I'm really having an interesting time navigating it and figuring out how to kind of connect those parts of me.
Yeah.
And so then when I have dreams, and again, I'm not taking these literal meanings out of them, but it gives me an opportunity to kind of focus on that feeling of stress that I'm experiencing, how it's changing my dreams, because there is a discernible feeling of stress when you wake up and you've had a nightmare or a stress dream. Mm-hmm. And to translate that, over the last couple of years, I've been doing a lot of crochet work, and not in any capacity to create a sweater or anything in general. It's just the act of repetitive motion is very calming. Mm-hmm. As a person who doesn't like routine, for some reason, the meditative quality of that, repetitive cycle of crocheting, it's satisfying this stress, and it's satisfying an input. It's like a feeling of I'm doing work using that stress. Yeah. And it's very focused, and it almost takes the anxiety and kind of muddles it down into a more tangible emotion than just this buzzing noise.
Yeah.
And so one of the pieces that I did that really sticks out to me, it was a piece of driftwood that I crocheted embroidery thread. I did this like tiny work in a piece of rusted wire that I found in the lake. And I, connected this piece of rusted wire to this natural organic material using this yellow thread. And I'm just so satisfied with this. It looks like static, this scrambled up little piece of rusted wire that has been knotted and tied to this piece of driftwood. Something about it makes this like physical representation of the stress that I was feeling when I created it.
Wow.
And it's not that it cured me of that moment, but I finally found this moment of, okay, I'm having this internal thing that I can't explain. I can't talk through it. I can't label it.
Right.
But if I put something in my hands and begin working with it, I can tell that it's translating into a physical thing that I can now look at and observe and say, that was a function of that creative energy. And now I have this piece of work. It doesn't matter what I do with it. I just can see it now.
Right.
And so I've translated,
yourself, yeah.
It's become this physical thing that I can see versus this emotional thing that I can't explain.
Yeah.
And so I've had a few pieces of work that really satisfy that, balance. And I'm not a person who needs answers for everything. I don't need to have a reason for everything, but to have what almost seems like an answer to that stress that is a physical product of that stress.
To have a tool.
Yeah, there's something
to translate that.
Yeah,
there's
something very important about that. So
yeah, and maybe that's not a label, but trying to put the feeling states to put words to help words or identifiable labels or whatever does sort of transform it into something that maybe can be then recognizable and dealt with in a certain way.
Yeah, I think.
And something about like the how you're talking about is my process too, is using, and definitely not as eloquently stated as you, but translates that emotional state into those physical objects that represent, also don't have words, but have the experience of that in part in that time. Mm-hmm. And that's so special.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, I had wrote down, some specific feeling of, like with oil pastel. One thing I work with is oil pastel. And, what I had wrote down and highlighted was translating emotions that you can't explain into a physical texture. And I think to me that just, it's helping me. Oh, I now I remember. So the mindfulness that comes with accepting something that you can't actually accept, acknowledging it more so.
Ooh, accepting something that you can't accept. I'm just repeating that.
And so, like I always, when I'm having a moment where I'm really struggling with something, I put my hands in front of me in this kind of bowl shape, and I'm holding that emotion. I can feel myself like physically holding the weight that I've been carrying around all day, not being able to get over it. And I can set it down next to me, and I can just, put my hands over it and say like, okay, it's there. It exists. I can't say that I'm okay with it, but I acknowledge that it exists. That's a really hard process for my mind. Yeah. But I think, and what I've been feeling lately with my art is that if I can, that physical feeling of holding it in my hands, well, there's that art piece that I just created. Now I can set it down and it's sitting on, the windowsill in my house, or, it's sitting on the, whatever piece of furniture, and I see it and it doesn't bother me anymore. I just acknowledge it. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's a very therapeutic process for me. Mm-hmm. It's not curing anything. There's nothing to be cured. It's just managing how those emotions exist within us, and if they can do harm or something like that, you want to deal with them. That's a hard thing to do. Mm-hmm. And it's so abstract that, in the first few weeks of even talking with any professional about that kind of stuff, it's like, well, how am I supposed to get over it if I can't actually get over it? I'm not okay with it.
Yeah.
Well, it's not about getting over it. It's something, it's a blank, what do you do?
I feel like it's about transforming it.
Yeah. And that's what I'm
never
trying
getting
to do.
over it. And I feel like, when you were saying, I want to get back to the windowsill for a second. So when you said like you took your object and you put it on the windowsill and you're okay with it, I was still in that moment going, oh, wow, I bet it looks really great in the morning sunshine.
Yeah.
And now it's being bathed in sunshine. And what, like, I kind of spin.
Yeah.
And now it's a metaphor of like, you brought it into the light. Mm-hmm. And it can exist differently. And then the relationship of other people witnessing your work transforms it and then gives a gift back to you because of the responses too. It's like this beautiful, insane thing. I know, right?
I'm so glad that this is not just happening in my mind or like a brief conversation at the cafe. Like this is something that I can re-listen to because that's so good. That's such a good point. And I mean, you just hit another couple of things I wanted to talk about, but so the only routine that I actually care about among general ones that are really important is the observing the sunrise. And specifically the moment right before it crosses the horizon, like on Lake Michigan. I mean, we're in Sheboygan. It's one of the most like emotionally everything. I don't know. I can't explain it because it's a feeling, but, that moment right before the sun crosses over the horizon, there's something about, I know exactly what to expect, but it is new every time. Yeah. I mean, the weather is different. The birds are different. What I'm wearing, what I'm feeling is different. Yeah. It's the same, timed out process, but it's different every time. You can never expect it to be the same. There was one day when I used to bike down to the lake and I would sit and read my book until the sun rose, and then I'd sit there and watch it. 5 minutes after, I'd get up and I'd bike back to my house. And there was one day somebody was playing a bagpipe 20 feet away from me the whole time. Like, I got there, they were playing. A half hour goes by, they're still playing, and I get up to leave, and I was just like, I mean, this is a wonderful thing to be just observing.
Oh, man.
It disrupted my normal flow, but I was just like, wow, this person is just blasting a bagpipe.
That is so fantastic. I'm so jelly that I wasn't there for that.
It was so strange. And they're just not playing to anybody. They were standing to the lake, playing like to the sunrise.
Come on.
Just this, and I couldn't read. I usually sit and read, and I couldn't focus for a second because I was just like, it was such a strange, reflective moment for me, and I won't ever forget it.
No,
I've seen how many sunrises in my life, but I will never forget that one. No, it's just so strange and wonderful.
And I let okay, well that is the coolest thing. I want a bagpipe and a sunrise really soon. I feel like I'm due for that. Yep. But the act of the sun rising and having a whole new landscape to look at, that sky and the colors and the experience of it.
The colors.
I mean, it's I was going through a really difficult time, and my boss at the time was like, I was sharing some things, and my boss at the time was like, her name's Cindy, and she's like, this day is going to end, and there's going to be another day. Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, I've heard that before in sort of like a meme-ish sort of way. Yeah. And I just dismiss those things kind of because they bother me a little bit. But the way she said it and how I experienced it was like, oh my God, this day's going to end?
Yeah.
That's awesome. This is fantastic. And then tomorrow I get to re-experience and try again. Yeah. And that newness that you're talking about, that wanting to reinvigorate or reconnect and feel that excitement happens every morning.
Yeah. Yeah. And I struggle with it most of the time because I don't wake, or I work at 5 a.m. And so I'm at work before the sun's up. And so I miss it most of the days that I'm waking up. But on my days off, it's not every day, but I try to take the mindful time to go out and observe this thing that I've seen, however many days I've existed. And it's always such a treasure for me. And it truly is one of the most peaceful moments that I regularly experience. Like the only other thing that I can equate to it is when I'm in such a good creative mode that the only reason I know time has passed is that my tea is no longer hot. Like that, it's that level of mindfulness that I experience.
Yeah.
Where I'm so in the zone. And even if I'm having, a lot of stress or there's a ton of that static anxiety inside me, being able to observe the color shifting, the birds, the lake, the waves, the sound of the waves and the meditative sound of it.
Totally.
I mean, it's a complete, you close your eyes, you're having a different experience. You open your eyes, you take a deep breath. It encompasses so many different aspects of how stress can affect us. And it kind of just washes over it and gives space for you to just start reminding yourself that you do get to start over every day. And that can instill a lot of motivation to maybe take on some things that are stressful or let go of things that are stressful.
Yeah.
And I struggle with that too. So
yeah, I think we do.
I think maybe that's like one of the most significant routines in my life is looking forward to it, experiencing it, and then taking away from it and changing my day from it. So yeah, it's a lot.
I love that.
Yeah.
We had a guest on that Caitlin Keela, and she talks about she's a yogi and talked about, is she a yogi? Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Okay. But talking about like each breath is like a renewal. And when you're talking about the waves and having them, like I occasionally try and when I have the static, when I have the anxiety, try and relate the breath to thinking about the waves and having that sort of crocheted water landscape. It's create that sense of calm.
Yeah, it's like a conductor or like a conduit, I guess, for that. You can focus it on something that helps you manage it.
Yeah.
And keep moving.
Yeah.
Keep breathing.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of conversation, a lot of deep conversation. I'm trying to think of like other things that I wrote down. I mean, I love that this conversation is totally self-sufficient, self-sustaining. But
yeah. Is there something you want to focus on the last, let's see, you had talked about fruits of creativity, life function, expression, giving specific ideas.
Oh, I think I have something.
Yeah. All right.
Should I just start talking?
No.
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
Welcome back to In the Act. I'm Erica Hunsinger. We are here with Sarah Baughman talking about dreams and the sunrise and creativity and transformation.
So just trying to think of other things because I feel like we could literally talk all day.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
But so for a little while, and I kind of so in the changes of my life, I just bought a house, I moved, changed creative space. My energy to, I guess, motivation and connectivity to my creative cycle has kind of ebbed and flowed a lot.
Yeah.
And I'm in a little bit of a lower, I guess productivity is the right word, but I can tell I'm prioritizing different things than art making.
Yeah.
But for a while, I had been doing this thing called, it was Art Biscuits, but it was basically a doodle pen pal situation. And I would get my friends, their address, and then I would just send them doodles. And it would be accumulated doodles over the course of maybe a month or so. I would cut them out and they would all be tiny. I mean, I was super into tiny art for a long time.
Yeah.
And I just stuff an envelope with these random, like a watercolor painting that I scribbled over, or, I clipped out something from a magazine and doodled over it. And then there might be a little jot down of thoughts from one day and then a letter from another day. And I would just send them to my friends, and then they would send me something in return. And it was this very low expectation pen pal thing that I was doing.
Send you in return, like they would transform what you made and send them to you, or have their own thing and send them independently?
Have their own things. And every friend that I would do this with, it would be a completely different, response. Some of my friends would collage something. Others would send me, a little tiny painting or stickers or something. And I think it was charming because we don't get to do a lot of snail mail these days. It's just, unless you're really actively doing it, I don't think it's, it's not as sacred anymore. It's just kind of fallen off the radar. And so there was a lot of effort put into it. But there's also so little expectation with what you have to send or do or produce that I'm really encouraging of anyone to take on those feelings of creativity and express them without judgment and without saying, oh, I wish I was as good as you, or I wish I could do that too. I want them to just do it. And I don't want them to be anything like me. I want them to do it however they feel.
Yeah.
And that's a really vulnerable, path to take.
Yeah.
But I think it's very healing. It can be very comforting. It can be very exciting.
Yeah.
And so, on the spectrum of perfectionism, Art Biscuits falls on the really low end of, create something, package it up in a little envelope, throw a stamp on it, and send it out into the world. I might show somebody. You might be, I might be showing people your art. You don't know. Right. And that's fine. It's okay.
I love that.
And it's like there's something so charming about just
so sweet
letting art out into the world and hoping that it goes somewhere.
Totally. And I you bring up such a good point, which is part of the show too, is I wanted to just demystify the act of creating, right? And that people do have that experience, like, oh, I'm not good enough. I can't, like you were saying, and I can't draw as good as you, or, we all have those things. Oh, absolutely. I can't do that in the same way. But you may not be able to, and you may not ever be able to, but you do have something, and you do it really well.
Yeah. And
I know you do, because I haven't met one person in the world, of all the people that I've met, as annoying and loud as I am, I have not met yet one person who doesn't create something that's somehow super interesting and focused on whether it's collecting a bunch of things, whether it's like arranging things or organizing or how they, I don't know, whether it's intentional art making or not. Everybody's creating some cool thing in their life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, it's about being able to find different mediums and non-conventional mediums.
Yes.
And one thing that I did over the confinement of the pandemic, I was collecting milkweed pods, and I was like processing them basically.
Oh, they feel so soft and silky.
I love them so much. They're kind of an anchor memory for me, because when I was a child, I went to this camp and we would collect them, and, we were just obsessed with them. They're such a unique – milkweed pods are so interesting.
They are. They look like alien things.
They're just so strange.
I just found them 4 years ago or something.
Oh, and they're fascinating. What? And then like the association with how important they are for pollinators. I mean, they're an amazing plant.
Yes.
You can eat parts of them. Like they're so cool.
Yeah.
But this, past year or whatever, I had been collecting them, and I was felting the fiber, and I was felting it into little sculptures. And I mean, they were absolutely rudimentary. They were just like cubes and circles, and then I would embroider beads into them.
Oh.
And it was just this process of taking something that I associate with so many good, pure memories of when I was a kid and when we would find these little things. And I was compiling them into a little memory. And I was taking these fibers, which are very akin to the feeling of memories, where it's like these little almost intangible fibers that, exist in your mind.
Yeah.
And then the seeds, I would take those and I was stringing them. I was threading a tiny needle through the seed. Half of them would break in half. So I had, 1,000 seeds, and I was just trying to poke the needle through it, and it'd break in half, and I'd have to start over. So many times I ran it into my thumb. But I just was like stringing them together on this thread. And in my head, I just kept like hearing this phrase of like sewing the needles or sowing the seeds back on the tree or sowing the seeds back on the plant. And it was this feeling of compiling these seeds, which are memories, they've kind of implemented as a memory.
Yeah.
And collecting them and remembering them and then, displaying them as an art piece. And so I have this little box of all this milkweed stuff that I was making. And so I'm trying to figure out the best way to display it, but as an observational piece. But there was something so interesting about that. And that's a medium that, I would never tell somebody like, oh, why don't you go make something out of plants?
Right.
Figure it out.
Right.
But
yeah, the definition of art, getting back to what people think art is really so confined to the fine arts, whether you're a painter, which is the highest skill, then sculptors, craft making is not, an art form, those.
I know.
And they've been debunked. They've been debunked by institutions and teachers and facilities, but the laymen, the people around us are still like holding on to these old adages of what is an artist and that it's okay. And to use what you have. When you said anchor memory, which I've never heard of before, just
I'm really
totally
stuck on
like
that phrase.
Threw me back like a weight into my younger self of like, what is an anchor memory in terms of object or natural world or what you've been drawn to then shift and change, transform.
Yeah. Yeah. The phrase anchor memory has really, it's a very tangible phrase. Like you can understand it without having to have it be explained.
Yeah.
You know exactly what it means because there are so many of them or so few of them. And you know exactly what that means.
And I love, the second part of that is I love what you followed your experience and love of nature and being, and then tapped into using, reflecting on the material made you reflect, right? It was like you found the material. I think many times that happens. I run an open studio and I always we have tons of materials out. I'm like, let the materials lead you.
Yes.
What are you drawn to today? What object or thing do you find that you're like, oh, I don't know what I'm going to do with this. I'm going to play around with it. And then so much of it is about what you're drawn to, what you start playing with, and then what happens on the other side of it. And that act is a creative act.
It starts with like a fascination with something and looking at it in a different way and not feeling like you have to know what to do with it. You know? And I nannied for a decade for the same family. And I remember always wanting to kind of dismantle the structure that they thought about creativity. And this was when I was exploring my own artistic, like what did I want to do as an artist? Because I knew I was kind of grappling with my identity as an artist because I wasn't a studio painter or like a gallery artist. I didn't have those weird societal norms that people have associated with it. And so I was really trying to, for myself, dismantle it, but also for these kids who I wanted them to explore creativity. And I remember we would do this game. It's called Exquisite Corpse, which is a weird name.
Love it.
But you take a sentence and you write out, it can be about absolutely anything. And you just, a sentence, and then the next person, you give it to them and they have to draw the sentence with no words, totally nonverbal. And then you fold over the sentence and the next person in line has to look at that picture and try to figure out what that original sentence was. And then you write that sentence out, fold over the picture, and it goes on. And so it's almost like a game of telephone where it keeps getting changed based on how the person is, the interpretation of the art piece. And these kids they would always try to draw like SpongeBob or like a character from a TV show.
Right.
And it was really rigid and structured. And I would draw the weirdest, craziest things that I could think of to try and engage them into this new idea.
Right.
New train of thought.
Right.
And I think, again, it's just like taking the judgment out of the creative process.
Yeah.
And elevating it to this excitement and playful. And then where does that go?
Yeah.
What medium catches your attention enough for a moment that you want to just mess with it.
Right.
Do something fun.
And it's so interesting because I think duplication and copying are so much a part of how creativity is taught.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yes.
And in some ways, I think it's not all bad either because I think that we try on – I kind of think of it like an outfit. Like you try on a new outfit and you're like, that doesn't feel right.
Yeah. You have to know what feels right.
You have to know what feels right. Yeah, totally.
But you also don't want to be confined to, well, if it doesn't look like, this specific artist's piece, I'm not good enough.
Right.
Or if I can't draw photorealism, I'm never going to be an artist. And
right.
It's like, oh my gosh, that's so nauseating.
Isn't it?
It's
oh my
so
gosh.
sad.
That's the hierarchy that the standard is if you can I get people who, because I do abstraction, occasionally I'll draw something and put it out there and somebody's like, I didn't know you could draw. Look at you. You're an artist.
Wow, aren't you an artist?
Elevates my craft and myself.
Suddenly, oh my gosh.
But it's so interesting. I mean, that's such a whole other avenue of thought. Oh God, I thought that was a spider at first. I'm sorry.
Oh, no.
Sorry, that just totally got me. I don't know where it was now.
Well, you talking about being an abstract artist just reminded me of, I had this thought, what if you, and this is just an exercise, I guess, but what if you went into like a cafe? So again, back to the functionality of art.
Yeah, let's do it.
As a means to have a totally predicted experience. What if you went into a cafe and the signage was abstract paintings? And the paintings were items that you could purchase, but they invoke the feeling that the person making them wants you to feel.
Right.
Can you imagine how weird that would be? I want that.
Right.
I want to walk into a place and see all of your paintings up there, and you're the chef, and you're like, well, what do you think that one makes you, what does that one make you feel? What do you think you're going to get? Is that something you want to feel?
It's obviously blueberry pie.
Yeah, exactly. Or it's like, a salad with cranberries in it. Right. So it's like, zesty and cool. But like, what if that was the thing? But like as a person who's made cafe signs, it was always very direct. It was these are the items. This is the price.
Communicate.
This is what you're going to feel because it's a bagel sandwich or a BLT.
Right.
You know what to expect. What if instead of telling you what you're going to expect, it was like what you're feeling tells you what you're going to expect,
Yeah.
And
I love it. There's probably a high-end restaurant in like New York on like the penthouse suite that some guy's like doing like, how are you feeling today? And like comes in and like reads the room and it's like, hold on a second, give me 2 hours, have some drinks. I'm gonna get this for you guys.
Yep.
I mean, what a cool way to do that. And it's a great point. I think that, the thing that I love about abstraction for me is like that the viewer then doesn't have to have doesn't need to know what my communication was necessarily.
Yes.
Because it's now their experience that's important with it, that they attribute, that they associate, and that I think you talked about ambiguity, that it has this ambiguousness then that is both frustrating because it's not a linear outlined defined communicative message or design or something, landscape or portrait or something like that, that then they have to find their own way.
Yeah,
and finding your own way is hard. Finding your own way is hard.
And it makes you
you repeat that.
It makes you like come to terms with the things that are bothering you all of a sudden.
Yes.
That's what, I had always, a lot of my art was always structured because that's kind of what I grew up learning and understanding. A lot of copying, a lot of photorealism.
Yeah.
And this is, at the point I'm at in my life, I'm going through a lot of different shifts. I went back to school. I'm returning to school. And so I'm coming to terms with different parts of my identity. And one of the things that's changing is my art. And it's becoming more abstract. It's becoming more about the emotions that I'm feeling and what I hope, not what I hope somebody feels, but I hope somebody feels something when they look at it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like with art, like I hope that it brings somebody to a space of emotions which can be not dangerous, but it can be scary.
Yes.
Because when you're not given the prompt, when you're not given the exact roadmap of the path, it will lead you down those places where, maybe there is something that I'm kind of pushing back and not wanting to hear among the static.
Yeah.
And when you have this, when the emotions kind of well up, all of a sudden you're like, well, why do I feel this emotion of loneliness when I look at a painting? What does that mean?
Right.
Am I lonely?
Right.
And so I like that feeling of ambiguity. I like that abstractness that I'm kind of introducing into my art, which used to tell people what to feel. It used to directly tell people, this is what you're supposed to get. Or it was an observational drawing that didn't have a flair of ambiguity.
Yeah.
And so moving towards these more emotionally based pieces, it's a really interesting avenue to be going down. And I'm learning to appreciate it in a different way than I ever have before.
Yeah. So. And I just want to backtrack for just 1 second. I also really love realism as well. And it can evoke.
Absolutely.
I think that there's
photography can be some of the most intense emotional content you can look at.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I think it's just, maybe it's in the, as I grow as a person, I'm just learning to navigate emotions differently. And I think art is becoming, as much as it was a part of my identity as I've been growing, it's becoming even more an expression of emotions for me. So
yeah,
something there.
Which comes back to the beginning of what we were talking about when you were talking about baking and that I don't even know how you put it now, putting something together that then someone else is going to have joy. So you're instilling so much of yourself in those products, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. There's a very caring input into that stuff. I'm doing it for, and it's always been about that. I don't work there because I hope to even own a bakery. It's literally that I enjoy the creative space, the process, and those joyful moments that you can help people have in their day.
Yeah.
That's really important because we don't have a lot of those.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Sarah, so much.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for having me.
If people want to get a hold of you or look at your art or whatever, is there a link to go to for you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I haven't. The Instagram page is called Art Biscuits.
Art Biscuits.
Yeah.
ARTBISCUITS.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I think there's a period in between the two.
Okay.
But that's it.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sarah, so much for exploring all this. It was absolutely delightful and wonderful and very meaningful to have you here.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's wonderful.
In the Act is produced in the studios at Mead Public Library in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. More information on the web at meadpl.org.